On a remote island, a tall, weathered lighthouse stood, its beams slicing through the dark, unforgiving sea. For years it had remained unoccupied, its keeper long gone, his disappearance a mystery no one dared to solve. But one stormy night, a weary traveler named Ethan found himself washed ashore, seeking refuge from the relentless waves. The lighthouse seemed like a beacon of safety, its light still rotating with an eerie precision. Ethan climbed the creaky steps, his boots echoing against the stone walls. As he reached the top, he was greeted by the sight of the vast, storm-churned ocean. The light flickered, casting long shadows across the room. Suddenly, the door slammed shut behind him with a force that rattled the entire structure. The air grew thick, suffocating, as if the very walls were alive. Ethan tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. Panic crept into his chest as the beam of light grew dimmer. Then, a whisper, low and guttural. "You're not alone." Ethan spun around, but the room was empty. His breath quickened. The whisper came again, this time closer. The shadows seemed to stretch and twist, forming shapes that flickered in and out of existence. His heart raced, each thump louder than the last. The storm outside was now a distant roar, but inside the lighthouse the air was heavy with the weight of something ancient. The light flickered once more, just as a cold hand gripped his shoulder. The keeper had never left. Ethan's body froze, his blood turning to ice. He could feel the cold fingers tightening on his shoulder, their grip not like flesh, but like the chill of death itself. Slowly, he turned around, expecting to see nothing. But there, standing in the corner of the room, was a figure. A pale, gaunt man, his eyes hollow and sunken, his face as weathered as the lighthouse itself. "Who are you?" Ethan stammered, his voice barely a whisper. The figure didn't answer. Instead, it stepped closer, its movements unnatural, jerky, like a puppet on strings. As it drew near, Ethan felt an overwhelming sense of despair wash over him. The air became colder, the scent of salt water and mildew thick in his lungs. It was as though the very essence of the lighthouse was pressing in on him. "Leave," the figure rasped, its voice a low, rasping echo. "This place is cursed." Ethan tried to move, but his legs wouldn't obey. His feet were rooted to the floor, as though the lighthouse itself was pulling him deeper into its cursed embrace. Suddenly, the beam of light from the lighthouse blinked out, plunging the room into darkness. The whispers started again, louder this time, a chorus of voices rising from every corner of the room. The walls seemed to close in, as though the very lighthouse was alive, hungry, waiting for its next victim. And then, the figure spoke again, its voice now a guttural growl. "You should have never come." With a terrifying scream, the shadows surged forward, engulfing Ethan completely. The last thing he saw before the darkness consumed him was the lighthouse's beam flickering once more, this time pointing directly at him. The Keeper's curse had claimed yet another soul. Ethan's vision went black, his consciousness slipping away like sand through his fingers. He felt weightless, as if sinking into the very heart of the ocean itself. The storm raged outside, but inside the lighthouse there was nothing but silence. Cold, suffocating silence. Then, a sharp breath. His own breath. Ethan gasped, his lungs aching as if they hadn't been filled with air in years. He opened his eyes, blinking against the harsh light that now surrounded him. But it wasn't the lighthouse's beam anymore. It was something far worse. He was no longer standing on solid ground. He was suspended in a vast, endless void, an inky blackness stretching on forever. Around him, the whispers had multiplied, becoming maddening, incoherent fragments of voices, some pleading, some cursing, others merely crying out in despair. "Join us," they murmured, their words like cold tendrils wrapping around his mind. Ethan tried to scream, but no sound came. The darkness pressed in from every side, squeezing his chest, his throat, his very soul. Then, out of the void, the figure, the Keeper, appeared once again. This time, the Keeper's form was more monstrous, less human, as if it were made of shadows and broken memories. "You've become a part of it now," the Keeper's voice echoed, distorted and alien. "The lighthouse, it needs you." The Keeper reached out with twisted skeletal hands, pulling Ethan closer. As his fingers brushed against Ethan's skin, he felt the pull of something ancient and powerful, something that had trapped souls for centuries. The lighthouse wasn't just a beacon of light. It was a prison, an eternal torment for those who dared to enter. In that moment, Ethan understood. The Keeper was not a man, but a spirit, bound to the lighthouse, one of many who had fallen victim to its curse. And now, he was one of them, lost, trapped, and doomed to haunt the island for all eternity. The last thing Ethan saw before the darkness swallowed him completely was the lighthouse beam flickering on the horizon. It was a silent promise. Whoever entered would never leave. The cold void swallowed Ethan whole, but his mind refused to let go of the horrors he had just witnessed. Somewhere, in the deepest part of his consciousness, a desperate flicker of defiance sparked. He didn't want to be lost forever. He didn't want to join the cursed souls that roamed the island in torment. In the darkness, he reached out with his mind, grasping for something, anything that could pull him from this nightmare. His fingers brushed against a memory, a fleeting moment from before. The storm, the lighthouse, the promise of safety. But now, safety felt like a distant, unreachable dream. A sound broke through the stillness, a low, guttural rumble, followed by a series of rattling, clicking noises. Ethan's heart raced. He wasn't alone. The Keeper's distorted form appeared again, closer this time. But this time, something was different. The Keeper's eyes, those empty, sunken pits, were now filled with a burning light. a malevolent glow that seemed to pierce straight through Ethan, as though it could see into the very fabric of his soul. "You cannot escape," the keeper said, his voice now tinged with malice. "This is your fate. You will never see the world outside. The lighthouse will never let you go." Ethan's breath quickened, his pulse pounding in his ears. He had to fight, had to escape. The keeper was powerful, yes, but Ethan had something the spirit didn't. Willpower, desperation, the need to survive. He focused on the light, the beacon that had lured him here. Even now it pulsed faintly in the distance, the lighthouse calling him like a siren. But this time, it didn't feel like safety. It felt like a trap. He couldn't let it pull him back. He couldn't let it claim him. He tore his eyes away from the keeper, focusing instead on the emptiness around him. A light of his own began to form within him, small at first, a fragile glow that flickered like a candle in the wind. But it grew, stronger, brighter. Ethan's willpower burned through the darkness, pushing the shadows away. The keeper snarled, his form flickering, losing its solidity in the presence of Ethan's newfound strength. "I won't be your prisoner," Ethan shouted, though his voice was weak, trembling. But it was enough. The keeper howled in rage as the shadows around Ethan began to unravel. The spirits trapped in the void screamed in unison, their voices merging into a single, cacophonous roar. But Ethan didn't stop. He pushed harder, focusing every ounce of strength he had left on escaping the nightmare. With one final defiant scream, the darkness shattered, and Ethan was falling back toward the light, the blinding beam of the lighthouse. He landed on the cold stone floor of the lighthouse tower, gasping for air, heart racing. The storm outside had calmed, the eerie whispers silenced, but something had changed. The lighthouse no longer felt like a prison. It felt like a doorway. Ethan stood up, trembling. His skin still felt cold, his mind haunted by the memories of what he had seen. But he had escaped. Or had he? As he turned toward the door, he noticed something in the corner of the room. The keeper's pale, gaunt face, grinning from the shadows. "You can never truly leave." The keeper's voice echoed, fading into the distance. Ethan's heart sank. It wasn't over. Not yet. Ethan's body froze, his breath hitching in his throat. The keeper's voice, the very voice that had haunted him in the void, lingered in the air, an eerie reminder that the terror wasn't gone. He turned slowly, heart racing in his chest, the walls of the lighthouse seeming to close in around him. The faint glimmer of light from the lighthouse's beam flickered through the cracked window, casting long, ghostly shadows across the room. His pulse hammered in his ears. The door was just a few feet away, but every step toward it felt like an eternity, as if the lighthouse itself were resisting his escape. The keeper's form was no longer in the corner, but Ethan could feel its presence, its cold, suffocating weight pressing against him, filling the room with an unseen dread. A soft creak echoed through the silence, and Ethan spun around, his breath caught in his throat. There, Standing at the top of the spiraling stairs was the Keeper, its shape now a monstrous, twisted silhouette. The spirit's eyes glowed bright, burning with hatred, and its mouth curled into a grin that wasn't human. "You think you can escape?" the Keeper rasped, its voice now full of venom. "This place owns you now." Ethan's mind raced. There had to be a way out. He couldn't let the Keeper trap him again. There had to be something, anything he could do. He darted toward the door, his hand shaking as he gripped the cold handle, yanking it open. But as the door creaked, the room shifted. The walls groaned, and the floor beneath him trembled. The lighthouse itself seemed alive, its beams of light turning against him. The door slammed shut before he could even step through. "Trapped," the Keeper whispered, its voice now a low, hissing murmur that echoed all around him. "Forever." Ethan's heart pounded harder as panic seized him. He slammed his fists against the door, but it was no use. It felt as if the very air was thick with the weight of hundreds of souls, trapped, forgotten, unable to escape. The Keeper moved toward him, its footsteps slow and deliberate, as if savoring the moment. "You are mine now," the Keeper snarled, its face twisting into a grotesque mask of rage. "And you'll never leave. No one leaves the lighthouse." Ethan's thoughts raced. He couldn't let this happen. He couldn't. He forced himself to think, his mind a storm of desperate ideas, searching for a way to break the curse. He remembered something. The lighthouse keeper had said it was a curse, that it claimed every soul who entered. But that meant there had to be a way to break it. The lighthouse wasn't just a prison, it was a door. If the keeper could trap people, maybe he could find a way to reverse it, to use the same force that had pulled him in to free himself. Summoning every ounce of strength he had left, Ethan turned toward the beacon. The light was dimming, fading into nothingness, but he could still feel its pull, its dark promise. With a sudden rush of determination, Ethan reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out the small metal locket he had found washed ashore earlier that day. A forgotten trinket, untouched by time. He stared at it for a moment, the weight of its cold surface in his hand, grounding him in the reality of his situation. He closed his eyes, focusing on the memory of the storm, the lighthouse, the promise of safety. The locket was his last link to the world outside. The keeper roared behind him, a shrill, bone-chilling sound that reverberated through the walls. But Ethan didn't flinch. He raised the locket high above his head, and in a single, desperate motion, he hurled it into the heart of the lighthouse's beam of light. For a moment, everything stopped. The air was still. Then, the light flared. The ground shook violently beneath Ethan's feet, the lighthouse trembling with an intense, suffocating force. Shadows twisted and writhed in every corner of the room, the keeper's form disintegrating into black smoke. Ethan could feel the curse starting to break, the very foundation of the lighthouse splintering as the dark energy began to unravel. "You can't," the keeper screamed, but its voice was already fading, swallowed by the chaos. The walls cracked, the sound of splintering stone filling the air, and Ethan felt himself being pulled forward, as though the lighthouse itself was tearing apart, expelling everything it had trapped. The light from the beacon burst outward, blinding him. With one final deafening roar, the lighthouse collapsed. When Ethan opened his eyes again, the storm had passed. The island was still, silent. The lighthouse was no longer standing. All that remained was a pile of rubble and the faintest echo of a whisper, as if the curse had finally been lifted. Ethan stood alone on the shore, breathing in the fresh, salty air of freedom. The dark presence of the keeper was gone, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Ethan knew he was truly free. Ethan stood motionless, the cool wind from the sea brushing against his face as the sun began to break through the storm clouds. The lighthouse, which had once loomed over the island like a dark sentinel, was nothing more than rubble now. The silence was almost deafening, the world feeling surreal, as if he had woken from a nightmare that was still lingering at the edges of his mind. For a moment he thought it was over. The keeper, the curse, the endless torment, gone. But as the minutes passed, a nagging feeling tugged at him, a sense of dread that refused to fade. Something didn't feel right. He turned back to the wreckage of the lighthouse, watching the last of the dust settle. But in the quiet, he swore he could still hear something. A low, unsettling whisper, faint but unmistakable. Not gone, never gone. His heart dropped. The keeper's voice. It was impossible. How could it still be here? He had broken the curse. The light had vanished. The lighthouse had crumbled. Yet the air still felt thick with something malevolent, as though the island itself was cursed to hold the spirits within its soil. Ethan stepped back slowly, his breath shallow, as he scanned the ruins. His legs trembled beneath him, but he couldn't tear his eyes away from the wreckage. His hand reached for the locket he had used to break the curse. But it was gone, vanished into the ether, leaving nothing but a sense of loss. It was as if everything he had done, everything he had fought for, was slipping away into nothingness. And then, just as his mind was about to snap from the strain, a figure appeared before him. Not the keeper, but someone else. A man, pale and gaunt, his eyes wide with terror. His clothes were tattered, worn from years of being trapped in the lighthouse. "Help, please," the man gasped, his voice hoarse. "You have to stop it. You think you've won, but it's not over. It will never be over." Ethan's mind raced. He didn't want to believe it. He didn't want to think that everything he had endured had been for nothing. But the man's face was filled with a desperation so raw, so genuine, that Ethan couldn't turn away. "Who are you?" Ethan asked, his voice shaking. The man's eyes glistened with a strange, haunted sorrow. "I was the keeper before him. I was trapped here, just like you. But the lighthouse, it's never satisfied. Once it takes you, it never lets you go. The light, it waits for the next soul. for the next person who dares to step foot on the island. Ethan stepped back, his mind reeling with this new revelation. The Keeper had been there before. How many others had been lost? How many more would fall victim to the same fate? The lighthouse wasn't just a prison. It was an insatiable beast, feeding off the souls of those who dared to seek refuge. The man's eyes filled with fear as the wind began to pick up again, and a distant rumble echoed from where the lighthouse had once stood. "It's coming back," the man whispered, eyes wide with panic. "You can't leave. No one can." Ethan looked around in desperation, trying to make sense of it all. The storm clouds were gathering again. The lighthouse was gone, yet it felt as though its influence was still alive, still watching. With a sinking heart, Ethan realized the truth. He hadn't broken the curse. The lighthouse wasn't a building. It was a force, an entity that had existed long before he had ever set foot on the island. And now that it had claimed him, it would never let him go. The man vanished as suddenly as he had appeared, leaving only the echoes of his words behind. The winds howled louder, and the earth beneath Ethan's feet trembled once more. His stomach churned, and a cold sweat broke out across his brow. He couldn't leave. The lighthouse was still here, waiting. The Keeper hadn't been defeated. It was only the beginning. The curse would continue. And as Ethan felt the pull of the lighthouse's curse once again tightening around him, he knew he was trapped, just like the others before him. The island would claim him. The lighthouse would claim him. And so it would continue forever. Ethan's heart raced as the ground beneath his feet trembled with increasing intensity, as though the island itself was waking from a long, cursed slumber. He wanted to run, to escape, but every part of him was paralyzed with fear. He had thought he had broken free, thought the lighthouse's grip on him was finally gone. But now, standing on the edge of the ruins, he realized with cold horror that the curse had never truly left. The winds howled louder, and dark clouds swirled ominously in the sky, circling above the island as if they were drawn by an unseen force. The air felt thick, oppressive, heavy with something ancient and malignant. Ethan's senses sharpened, and in the distance he saw a faint glow, something small, flickering. The lighthouse's beam. It was back. Number it couldn't be. But there it was. A single, thin beam of light cutting through the dark sky, piercing the storm. Ethan's mind raced. The lighthouse wasn't just a structure. It was alive. It had never been defeated. It was a force of nature, something more powerful than any curse or spirit. It fed on souls, trapping them for eternity, binding them to its will. And now, it was calling him back, just as it had done to so many others before him. He could hear the whispers again, rising from the ruins, louder this time. Return, return to us. With a surge of panic, Ethan turned to run, but the ground beneath him seemed to shift, the earth buckling as if the island itself was rejecting him. His feet stumbled, and he fell to his knees. The whispers grew louder, overwhelming his thoughts, their voices desperate and pleading. Don't run. It knows. It always knows. He looked up to see the pale figure of the keeper again, standing in front of him. His eyes glowed with the same malevolent light as before. The keeper's expression was no longer twisted with rage, but with something far worse. Sadness. His face was haggard, worn down by centuries of torment. "You can't escape," the keeper said, his voice like the wind itself, cold and hollow. "You are already a part of it. We all are." Ethan's chest tightened. The keeper's words echoed in his mind as the realization hit him. There was no escape. Not for him, not for anyone who entered the island's cursed shores. The lighthouse had always been a prison, a vessel that absorbed the souls of the lost and held them there forever. No matter how hard one fought, it would always call them back. "You're right," Ethan whispered, his voice breaking as the weight of his hopelessness settled over him. He had fought so hard, only to realize he had been playing into the lighthouse's hand all along. It had been waiting for him, just as it had waited for the keeper and all the others before him. The keeper stepped forward, his hollow eyes locking with Ethan's. "The curse is not just one of place, but of time. No one truly leaves. The lighthouse claims what it wants. You are its next keeper now, its next prisoner. Forever." Ethan's mind raced, and for the first time, he understood the true nature of the lighthouse. It wasn't just a building, it was a cycle, a never-ending loop that consumed everything in its path. Once you stepped foot on the island, there was no way to break free. You would either join the ranks of the spirits trapped within it, or you would become its new keeper, another wretched soul doomed to torment those who came after you. The keeper stepped closer, placing a cold hand on Ethan's shoulder. "Welcome to your eternity." As the keeper's grip tightened, Ethan felt a sharp, crushing sensation, like his very soul was being pulled from his body. His vision blurred, and the world around him began to distort, the lighthouse's beam growing brighter until it engulfed him entirely. His scream was lost in the wind, swallowed by the island's insatiable hunger. And just like that, Ethan became another part of the curse, another lost soul bound to the lighthouse for all eternity. The island would never let him go. The storm continued to rage. The lighthouse's light flashed across the sea, searching for its next victim. And the cycle would begin again. The world around Ethan blurred, his sense of self fading as the overwhelming pull of the lighthouse's curse consumed him. The pain in his chest intensified as his very essence seemed to stretch. Twisted and distorted by the invisible force, he tried to scream, tried to fight, but his body had betrayed him. He felt himself being pulled deeper into the darkness, his mind slipping into a state of numbness. Then everything stopped. For a moment there was nothing. No sound, no light, just an eternal, suffocating void. Ethan couldn't tell if he was alive or dead. The sense of time had disappeared, as if it no longer mattered. He couldn't remember who he was, only that he was trapped, lost, and the lighthouse's presence was still haunting him, lurking in every shadow. But then there was a flicker, a pulse of light. It was faint, distant, but it was something. Ethan clung to it desperately, trying to make sense of the world around him. The lighthouse, its light, he could feel it now, clearer than before. The lighthouse wasn't just a prison. It was a prison made of memories, of lost souls trapped in time. And somewhere, deep within that swirling mass of energy, Ethan realized the truth. He was now part of it. He was part of the lighthouse's unending cycle. He heard the whispers again. This time, they were not just the keeper's voice, but countless others. Voices of the lost, the broken souls who'd been drawn into the lighthouse over the centuries. Help us escape. Their voices weren't desperate, but resigned. They knew that escaping wasn't possible anymore. They had long given up on the idea of freedom, bound by the lighthouse's call for so long that it had become their reality. The truth of it hit Ethan like a ton of bricks. There was no escape, not for him, not for any of them, not ever. But even as the despair seeped into him, a glimmer of something that resembled hope, flickered deep within his chest. The light, the pulse, the faint memory of life outside the island. It hadn't gone completely. There was still a part of him that resisted the pull, a fragment of his true self that refused to give in. The lighthouse wanted him to break, to accept its claim on him. But Ethan knew, somewhere deep within his soul, that the real power lay in the choice to fight back, to not succumb completely. The keeper's voice once again echoed through his mind. You cannot fight it. The island will consume you. The curse will never release you. You are the keeper now. Ethan's mind burned with the weight of those words, but he refused. He wouldn't allow himself to become just another soul, bound to the lighthouse's eternal hunger. His fingers clenched, his body convulsing as something began to shift deep within him. The pulse of light flickered again, stronger this time, and with it came a realization. If he couldn't break the curse completely, he could at least stop it from claiming anyone else. The whispers around him grew frantic, their voices melding into a single, unified cry. But Ethan had no time to think. He forced himself to focus, to use the faint remnants of his power. The light from the lighthouse grew brighter, blinding in its intensity, and then, as the keeper's ghostly presence loomed closer, Ethan gathered all his strength and reached for it. With a final desperate push, he willed the light to focus on him. A deafening crash of energy filled the air, and the light exploded outward, spiraling like a vortex. Ethan was thrown back, his body racked with pain, as the light consumed everything around him. The keeper screamed, his voice dissolving into nothingness. The lighthouse shook violently, its very foundation trembling, and then, as quickly as it had appeared, the light disappeared. The storm calmed, the whispers fell silent, and the island, once so suffocating, so alive with the curse, became still. For the first time in an eternity, the lighthouse was quiet. Ethan lay on the ground, his chest heaving with exhaustion, his mind a storm of confusion. He didn't know if he had succeeded or failed, but the island no longer felt like a trap. It felt like a graveyard, silent, abandoned, lifeless. He rose slowly, his body aching, and turned toward the horizon. The sea was calm, the sky clearing. The lighthouse, now nothing more than a pile of stones and ruins, stood silent and broken. And for the first time since his arrival, Ethan felt free. But even as he walked away, something deep inside him felt off. The curse had been broken, at least for now, but the island held secrets that even time could not erase. The lighthouse was gone, but its spirit, its hunger, would always remain. And Ethan knew that one day it would call to someone else, just as it had called to him. But for now, he had escaped. For now, he was free. Ethan trudged forward, his steps unsteady as he left the remnants of the lighthouse behind. The island, once thick with a malevolent presence, now felt unnaturally peaceful. The storm had passed, the air was still, and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore was soothing, almost peaceful. But beneath it all, a strange weight pressed on him, a feeling that he hadn't completely escaped. As he walked further away, his mind began to swirl with confusion. The lighthouse was gone. The curse had been broken, or so it seemed. But why did he still feel as if the island was watching him? Why did he feel a coldness that refused to leave him, no matter how far he walked? He reached the edge of the island, where the cliffs met the sea, and for a moment, he allowed himself to look out across the vast, endless water. The horizon stretched endlessly before him, the calm sea merging with the sky in an almost dreamlike haze. Then, a voice. "Did you really think you could leave?" Ethan froze, his breath catching in his throat. The voice was low, haunting and unmistakable. The Keeper. He spun around, but the island was empty, silent. There was no figure, no ghostly presence, but the words hung in the air like a cold fog. His pulse quickened, his heart pounding in his chest. The island, the curse, wasn't gone. It was inside him now. He could feel it. The connection had been forged the moment he stepped onto the island, the moment the lighthouse had claimed him. "You are the Keeper now." The voice was not from the Keeper anymore. It was deeper, more distorted. It was the island itself, reaching into his mind, claiming his thoughts. Ethan staggered back, a cold sweat coating his skin. The lighthouse had tried to consume him, but in the end, he had fought it. Or so he thought. But now he understood the true horror. The lighthouse had not only trapped souls within its walls, it had a far more insidious way of claiming its victims. It made them a part of itself. Those who fought it didn't escape. They were absorbed, twisted into its endless cycle. Ethan's hands trembled as he clutched his chest. The feeling of the lighthouse's curse was spreading through him, infiltrating his veins, his very essence. He tried to fight it, but it was no use. The island had already taken him, and now it wanted him to become its new keeper, to ensure that the cycle continued. He could feel the darkness creeping into his soul, taking root where the light had once flickered. "There's no escaping now," the voice continued, growing louder, more triumphant. "You are bound to this place, just like all the others." Ethan dropped to his knees, his breath shallow, the weight of the curse threatening to crush him. He had thought he had freed himself, thought that by breaking the lighthouse he had won. But now he realized that victory had never been possible. The island had no end, no true escape. It would always call out to those who dared to approach, and when they came, they would join its eternal suffering. He looked up at the horizon once more, the endless sea now feeling more like a prison than a vast escape. The island had claimed him. There was no running. There was no final freedom. And then something shifted. A sound, a faint, distant whisper far away from where he knelt. It was a voice, not the keepers, not the islands, but a voice he recognized. Ethan. Ethan. His heart raced, a flicker of recognition sparking within him. His eyes widened in disbelief. It was her voice. "Ethan, please, don't let them take you." His mind spun, and for a brief, fleeting moment, the darkness in his chest faltered. He could see her, her face, soft and familiar, like a memory he had long buried. "Ethan, fight it. You still have a choice. You are not them." The voice grew clearer, a thread of hope in the suffocating darkness. It was his last chance. But it came with a terrifying realization. He was standing at the precipice, and only he could decide whether to embrace the curse of the island or break its hold, once and for all. He rose to his feet, the air around him heavy, the sea crashing in the distance. A part of him, no matter how small, still clung to the hope of freedom. He felt her presence like a whisper in the wind, a beacon of light against the encroaching darkness. And then, the choice was clear. He turned back to the ruins of the lighthouse, its broken structure still visible in the distance. The cycle could end, the curse could be broken, but it would cost him everything, every part of his being. It was the only way to free himself, and to ensure that the island never claimed another soul again. Taking a deep breath, Ethan made his choice. The curse would be defeated, the island would be silenced, and he would be the one to do it.